I think the first one we want to get into is gun rights. And man, are we far enough into this interview where I can say the word gun? Because we're going to get into censorship too. Because
Yeah.
you can't say gun early on in a video. It gets taken
Isn't
down.
that crazy? It's
How
crazy
crazy
that
is
we
that?
live in a
Wild.
world where there are big tech oligarchs and radical progressive lefts that want to violate our right to talk about our other rights. That's a scary world. And so when we talk about this critical moment in this nation's history, I mean, really, that's where the rubber hits the road on that stuff. But yeah, man, I mean, fighting for the Second Amendment, it says, the plain text of it says, it shall not be infringed. And the Supreme Court has told us, certainly we understood from the founding fathers and the ratification of the 14th Amendment as well, that the right to keep and bear arms was about an individual's right to protect him or herself from the government, protect his or her home, property, family, friends, neighbors, and community. And that's a fight, that's a right that's always going to be worth fighting for.
Absolutely. Now, when we kind of get into the Second Amendment Preservation Act, which is something that you have been spearheading, and I don't live in Missouri. I used to live in Fayetteville, Arkansas, so I come to Missouri frequently. So love your state. But as a citizen of the United States, this matters for all of us. This isn't just a Missouri issue. This is a broader issue that we should all be paying attention to. Can you walk us through, there's been some back and forth with the way that each amendment affects the act, because I know that, when it was coming down the line, as you said, Second Amendment shall not be infringed, pretty straightforward, or it should be. I think it should be. But they kind of came back with, what Article 6 and then Article 10, can you walk us through the back and forth on this so that voters and constituents can understand what is it, what's going on, and what they need to be paying attention to?
Absolutely. And really, the Second Amendment Preservation Act, SAPA, as I refer to it, is a statute that was enacted by the Missouri General Assembly and signed into law by the Missouri governor 2 or 3 years ago. And the act is about protecting the right to keep and bear arms, but it's also about the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution. And people sometimes forget about that one. The 10th Amendment says that any authority not given to the federal government or deprived to the states, denied to the states, is enjoyed by the states and the people of the states. It's this residual fount of legal authority for the states. Our federal government is a government of limited authority, and any authority not given to that limited authority, given to the federal government, is then reserved by the states. The states have that residual power. And part of it's referred to as the police power, and it's really the authority to police the population of your state. And so that includes state and local law enforcement. And so what SAPA says is that the state of Missouri will not allow state and local law enforcement to be coerced, co-opted, and cajoled by federal officials in the federal officials' attempts to carry out unconstitutional gun registrations and gun bans. Like, who could be against that, right? I mean, all we're saying is we're not going to let you come down and tell our people what to do if you're trying to enforce unconstitutional restrictions.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. There's definitely the gray area that shouldn't be a gray area between how the federal government is treating the space between shall not be infringed and what they tell the states they can and cannot do. And so the fact that this is something that they're fighting at all just shows you the level of overreach that they're trying to enact here.
Well, and I see this all the time. Yeah, sorry, man.
Okay. Can I ask a kind of weird curveball to this? So President Trump, when he gets elected, he says he wants to do a mass deportation. And he said he wants to use local police to help do that. How would this affect that? Because that's federal government trying to use local police. At the same time, you're saying that they shouldn't be able to do it. Would that cause a problem then?
Not necessarily. Again, it's because of the way in which the federal government and state governments interact. There are things that the federal government can has the legal authority to do, like enforce the immigration code. And there's things the federal government cannot do, which is like control the state police force in an unconstitutional gun grab. So that's really the distinction: lawful legal federal authority or state authority. The federal government absolutely has the authority and the moral and legal obligation to defend our borders. And so asking the states to assist in, investigating criminal enterprises in relation to immigration code and helping to enforce the immigration code, that's not something that is something the federal government can lawfully do. And I think there was a case, I think it was in 2012, dealing with Arizona, and Arizona had basically enacted their own state statutes saying, well, we're going to enforce immigration code because the federal government isn't doing it. And the United States Supreme Court said, well, you're actually preempted because there are already immigration statutes on the books that allow the federal government to come in and request assistance from the locals.
Got you. So that falls under really more of the fact that each state individually can declare, invasion or state of emergency rather than the federal government not saying so, and then they have no help to fix it. So it sounds more of a remedy than the federal government enacting policy. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think, again, you're looking at two different lines of legal analysis. When you're talking about a conflict between a state law and a federal law, what you're looking for is preemption. Is the federal law a valid constitutional federal authority? And if it is, does it preempt local authority? And the courts are supposed to find a way to synthesize those two. They want those two to fit together. The court doesn't want to, a federal court should not be eager to strike down state statutes. They're trying to synthesize those, but only where there's a direct conflict between the text of the two does the preemption doctrine prevail. What I'm talking about is different under the 10th Amendment, and really what I'm talking about is the anti-commandeering doctrine, and it stands for the proposition that the federal government can't commandeer the apparatus of state government to do what the federal government has no legal authority to do in the first place.
Really basic question then, just to get it out there. Are they coming for our guns?
I think so. I mean, no question. Look, the federal government, especially in the Biden administration, has ramped up efforts to manipulate the firearm accessory, and ammunition marketplace. Illegal bump stock rule, illegal pistol brace rule, illegal attempt to redefine what constitutes a gun dealer to stop person-to-person gun sales, manipulation of the ammunition marketplace by trying to foreclose or trying to stop civilian sales of ammunition from a plant that produces primarily military-grade ammunition. You also look at the rule in the Department of Commerce that attempted to limit both import and export of firearms. So the Second Amendment is absolutely under attack by a rampant federal bureaucracy under the Biden-Harris administration. And I think the next 4 years are going to be really critical to whether or not we're going to preserve our freedoms. We know that the federal government has failed in its attempts, and states have failed in their attempts to limit an individual's right to keep and bear arms. They lost the head-to-head direct assault. So now what they're trying to do is do an in-run around the Second Amendment and make it to where we can't own accessories and ammunition.
Because I live in Georgia, so we have constitutional carry here, which is great because you don't have to worry about it. There's not a lot of stress about it. You just own a firearm and you're good to go. Is Missouri like that too?
Yeah, Missouri is a constitutional carry state, and you have a right to conceal and carry without a permit here in the state of Missouri. We have a robust protection of our right to keep and bear arms. It's in Article 1, Section 23 of the Missouri Constitution. And fortunately here in Missouri, the text of the constitutional amendment not only explicitly protects the right to keep and bear firearms, but also ammunition and accessories. Those words appear in our Constitution. There's also, it creates a legal obligation on behalf of the state to protect those rights. So when I'm filing lawsuits against the federal government to stop their illegal pistol brace rule, that's what I'm required to do by our Constitution. It's my honor, my duty, my privilege, and not only a legal but moral obligation to fight to protect those things.
So when they try to inflate something like the price or make it just really difficult to get guns or ammunition, or like you said, the accessories, how do we go from the core of something like that of course, enshrines our right in Missouri and federally, but specifically you're talking about Missouri, to carry in that constitutional carry? How do we understand, and, I guess not as citizens, but help us understand, how do you fence against them raising prices, making it really difficult to actually get these things so that you can practice, which as a responsible gun owner, you're supposed to be doing, and, and actually have the ability to protect our family and hunt and all the other things that people do with guns?
Well, I think there's two different answers there. Number one, there's the answer of how should the court interpret challenges to those restrictions on ammunition accessories? And there's number two, like practically speaking, what should attorneys general be doing? So let me start with the first one and say, I think that the way to interpret the Second Amendment is to look at the text, history, and tradition of the words written down and give them the meaning they had at the time they were written down, and through the prism of enactment of the 14th Amendment. So initially, the Bill of Rights only restricted the federal government. It wasn't until passage of the 14th Amendment that the rights in the Bill of Rights were then incorporated against the states. And not all of them have been incorporated yet, but the Second Amendment has. And so, we would look at, well, what did the founders or the drafters and ratifiers of the 14th Amendment, what did the right to keep and bear arms, what did that mean to them? And certainly that meant gunpowder, musket balls, ammunition, accessories, bayonets, all the things that go with the right to keep and bear the gun itself that would be attendant there too. The founders and the drafters and ratifiers of the 14th Amendment would have understood that you need those things to make the gun work, or to practice with the firearm, or to be able to use the firearm. And so you would look at what's being challenged today, and then look at that list of things that would have fit under the text, history, and tradition at the time the words were written down, and is what's being claimed today similar to or dissimilar from that list? And I think by and large you're going to find, and again, I think that's all through the prism of shall not be infringed, and so there should be no restrictions on those kinds of accessories and ammunition. From a practical standpoint, here in Missouri, let me give you an example. So we have the Lake City Ammo Plant, which is run by Olin Winchester, and they make 5.56 ammunition. Primarily, that plant makes ammunition for the Department of Defense. Like 90% of small arms ammunition for the military comes from that plant here in Missouri. It hires working Missouri families, pays them a good wage, keeps people employed, keeps our Department of Defense well armed. But on the side, in order to make money, Olin Winchester, when they're not making bullets for the Army, they make bullets for you and me. They make Winchester ammunition that we fire out of our AR-15s. And what the Letitia James in New York had said was, hey, Joe Biden, you have to tell Lake City to stop making civilian ammo or cancel their contract. Well, at that point, that's a due process violation. Olin Winchester has a property interest in their profits from making that ammunition. And if you dry up the civilian marketplace of ammunition, then the cost to you and me goes up. And so we put a cease and desist letter in place to stop that, and we're successful, because that was a market manipulation designed to drive you and me out of the marketplace and prohibit our ability to buy small arms ammunition.
That's so interesting. So one follow-up on that. What is Letitia James telling the President of the United States, Biden-Harris administration, what is she doing telling them what to do with Missouri? Or anything else for that matter?
Well, and it's because she doesn't give a hoot about our state. She doesn't care about Arkansas or Missouri or any other flyover state. And she's more than happy to put Missourians out of work in order to disarm the American population. And I'm not going to let that happen.